Somewhere along the way, you stopped reacting like other people, not outwardly. Most people would never notice it, but internally something changed. You became calmer during chaos, harder to surprise emotionally, harder to hurt openly. And maybe that sounds like strength to everyone else. But deep down, you know it came from somewhere darker than strength. It came from adaptation. From learning very early that being emotionally unprotected could destroy you slowly. And the strange part is that most people with dark traits don't even realize when those traits began forming. They think it's just personality, just the way they are. But personalities are often built around wounds people never had the chance to heal properly. You can see it in the way you observe people now. You don't trust easily anymore. You analyze tone changes. You notice inconsistencies instantly. You pay attention to the energy behind words instead of the words themselves. And sometimes you know what someone is feeling before they do. That level of emotional awareness sounds like intelligence on the surface, but beneath it is usually survival. Children who grow up in emotionally unpredictable environments become experts at reading people because they have to. They learn that safety depends on observation. A slight mood shift matters, silence matters, facial expressions matter. Everything becomes information, so the nervous system adapts. It becomes hyper-aware, hypervigilant, constantly scanning for emotional danger, even when nothing is technically wrong. And years later, people call you intuitive without realizing they're looking at someone whose mind was trained by instability. That's where the first dark trait begins: emotional distance. You probably crave connection more than people realize, but when someone gets too emotionally close to you, something inside tightens. You begin needing space. You become quieter, slower to respond, less emotionally expressive. It happens automatically, almost like your body pulls away before your mind can understand why. Because intimacy feels dangerous when your nervous system associates vulnerability with pain. So instead of fully opening up, you learn to control access to yourself carefully. You reveal emotions in pieces. You hide certain thoughts no matter how much someone says they care. You let people stand near your walls without ever letting them fully inside, and after a while, emotional distance stops feeling like protection. It starts feeling like identity. People think you're mysterious, independent, hard to read, but most emotionally distant people are not trying to be cold. They're trying to avoid being emotionally destroyed again in ways they still haven't recovered from. The second sign is more uncomfortable. You understand emotional influence too well. You know exactly how certain words affect people. You know how silence creates anxiety. You know how attention creates attachment. You know how validation makes people emotionally dependent. And even if you don't use these things maliciously, there are moments where you become aware of how much emotional power you actually hold in conversations. That awareness changes people, especially people who grew up feeling powerless. Because once someone learns how emotions work, control can start feeling safer than vulnerability. That's the hidden danger of emotional intelligence developed through pain. Empathy becomes strategic. You stop simply feeling emotions and begin analyzing them, predicting them, managing them, sometimes even manipulating them quietly, just to keep yourself emotionally safe. Not because you enjoy hurting people, because survival taught your nervous system that control prevents pain. And the terrifying part is that most emotional manipulation doesn't look aggressive. Sometimes it looks calm, mature, caring. That's why even good people can develop dark patterns without realizing it. The third sign is that you secretly feel safer being needed than being loved. Love feels unstable to you, temporary, fragile, but being needed creates security. If someone depends on you emotionally, mentally, financially, or psychologically, your nervous system feels less replaceable. So you become useful. You become the person everyone comes to for advice, the stable one during chaos, the listener, the helper, the person who always knows what to say. And from the outside, it looks incredibly selfless, but underneath that selflessness is often fear. Fear that if people stop needing you, they'll stop choosing you too. So without realizing it, you may build relationships where your value depends on emotional usefulness instead of authentic connection. That's why some people spend their entire lives overgiving while secretly feeling emotionally empty, because they learned how to earn attachment instead of simply receiving love naturally. The fourth sign is emotional retaliation that feels justified inside your mind. You probably tolerate a lot before reacting, more than most people realize. You suppress feelings, stay patient, stay controlled, until eventually someone crosses a certain line and something cold activates inside you. Suddenly empathy disappears, you emotionally detach. You justify hurting someone because they hurt you first. Your brain shifts into survival logic. They deserve this. I'm protecting myself. They should feel what I felt, and maybe part of that feels true in the moment. But over time, constantly viewing emotional pain through survival logic slowly disconnects people from softness. You stop asking what's healthy and start asking what's necessary. Children raised in emotionally safe environments usually learn communication and trust. Children raised around emotional instability learn strategy and self-protection. Those are completely different psychological foundations. One creates openness, the other creates guarded intelligence, and if those wounds go unhealed long enough, emotional coldness can slowly become normalized inside the personality. The fifth sign is that you test people constantly without telling them. You pull away to see who notices. You stay quiet to see who reaches out first. You reveal tiny vulnerabilities to study reactions. You observe effort more than affection because words stopped feeling trustworthy a long time ago. And if someone fails one of these invisible tests, your trust disappears almost immediately. The painful part is that most people never even know they were being evaluated, because wounded people often seek reassurance indirectly instead of asking for it openly. Direct vulnerability feels too risky, so your mind creates emotional experiments instead. Quiet little situations designed to answer one terrifying question. Can I trust you without getting hurt? And even during peaceful moments, part of your nervous system stays alert, always waiting for inconsistency, always preparing for disappointment, always scanning for emotional danger hidden somewhere underneath the surface. The sixth sign is emotional numbness mixed with emotional intensity. Sometimes you feel detached from everything. Conversations feel empty. Affection feels distant. You struggle to connect emotionally even when you genuinely want to. It's like your mind shuts certain feelings off automatically just to avoid overwhelm. Then suddenly, something tiny triggers a massive emotional reaction inside you. A delayed text, a change in tone, someone pulling away slightly, feeling ignored for too long, and all the emotions you buried underneath your self-control suddenly rise at once. Anxiety, anger, jealousy, fear, loneliness. Not because the moment itself is huge, but because your nervous system connects it to every similar emotional wound from the past. Suppressed pain doesn't disappear, it waits. And eventually, small moments activate old emotional injuries that were never fully healed. That's why emotionally guarded people often confuse themselves. One half feels numb, the other half feels everything too intensely, and carrying both at the same time becomes exhausting. The seventh sign is the most painful one of all. Deep down, you're not entirely sure who you are underneath all your adaptations. You've spent years becoming what situations required. Strong when strength was necessary, detached when vulnerability felt unsafe, funny when tension appeared, wise when others needed comfort. You learned how to mirror people naturally because adaptation kept relationships stable. But eventually, constant adaptation creates emotional exhaustion. You become easy to like but difficult to truly know. Different people bring out different versions of you until even you begin wondering which version is real. That question follows many emotionally wounded people quietly through adulthood, because survival sometimes forces people to become emotional shapeshifters before they ever get the chance to develop a stable sense of self. But here's the part that matters most. Having dark traits does not automatically make you a bad person. Some of the kindest people carry incredibly dark defense mechanisms because life taught them that softness without boundaries leads to suffering. Manipulation can begin as self-protection. Emotional detachment can begin as overwhelm. Hyper-independence can begin as abandonment. Control can begin as fear. The human nervous system adapts brilliantly to pain, sometimes too brilliantly. and eventually those adaptations become so normal that people mistake them for identity. But adaptation is not identity. A person can learn emotional control and still relearn vulnerability slowly. A person can become guarded and still rediscover connection. A person can grow emotionally cold and still uncover warmth underneath the armor, because darkness is rarely the deepest layer of someone. Usually beneath it is grief. Grief for the version of yourself that trusted naturally before pain taught you caution. Grief for the softness that no longer feels safe to express openly. Grief for every moment you needed emotional protection and had none. That's why awareness matters so much. The moment you begin recognizing these patterns consciously, they stop unconsciously controlling every relationship in your life. Healing doesn't begin with shame. Shame usually pushes wounded people deeper into emotional hiding. Healing begins with understanding. Understanding why your nervous system became this way. Understanding why vulnerability feels dangerous. Understanding why control sometimes feels safer than honesty. Understanding why emotional distance became comforting even when loneliness hurts you deeply. You are not evil for developing armor. You are not broken because survival changed you. You adapted to pain the best way your mind knew how. And maybe healing is not about destroying every dark part of yourself completely. Maybe healing is about understanding why those parts appeared in the first place, so you no longer need them to survive every human interaction. Maybe the goal is balance. To stay perceptive without becoming paranoid. To stay careful without becoming emotionally unreachable. To stay intelligent without turning relationships into emotional strategy. To stay strong without becoming numb. That kind of healing takes time because survival patterns become wired deeply into the nervous system. They don't disappear overnight. Sometimes fear will still disguise itself as control. Sometimes you'll still pull away emotionally. Sometimes your body will still expect abandonment even when love is standing directly in front of you. But awareness interrupts repetition. Every moment you recognize the pattern, instead of automatically obeying it, something changes quietly inside you. You become less controlled by old wounds, less trapped inside survival mode, less emotionally ruled by the past. And honestly, the fact that you can even reflect on these traits probably means there's still softness alive inside you somewhere. Real darkness rarely questions itself. Real darkness rarely fears becoming harmful. Wounded people do, because most emotionally guarded people are not trying to become monsters. They're trying to become safe after spending too much of their life feeling emotionally unsafe. And there's a huge difference between someone who enjoys causing pain and someone whose nervous system became defensive after surviving too much pain for too long. That difference matters more than you realize. So if this felt painfully familiar, don't rush to hate yourself for it. Sit with it quietly instead. Because sometimes the people most afraid of being emotionally dark are actually people who spent their entire lives trying to survive emotional environments that never truly felt safe in the first place.